Profile. Welcome to this week's edition of Profile. I'm Melinda Hull of Radio Japan, and today I have the pleasure of talking with Masumi Muramatsu. Mr. Muramatsu is the co-founder and current chairman of Simul International, a company headquartered in Tokyo which specializes in translation, interpretation, and business services. Mr. Muramatsu also himself has had a long and extremely illustrious career as an interpreter between Japanese and English. He's also active as an author and has taken a strong interest in issues related to cross-cultural communication. Welcome, Mr. Muramatsu, to Profile. It's a real pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Miss Howe or Melinda.
Yes.
Nice to talk to you and talk through you to hundreds of thousands of people in the world.
Yes, well, I'm sure they'll be very interested in what you have to say today.
Thank you.
Well, now, first off, I'd like to ask you, how did you become an interpreter?
By asking to be an interpreter back in 1949, many decades ago, Japan was under the Allied occupation.
Yes.
Read it, U.S. occupation mainly. I got my first English using job as a clerk typist. I studied hard and had the nerve to ask my boss, give me a chance to be an interpreter. That's in your interest.
And so, well, when you became an interpreter, how did you get a handle on the living language? It's very easy to read a language. Passive knowledge of a language is not hard to come by. But being able to talk to people and understand what they're saying is very difficult. How did you do that?
To begin with, I was a fairly talkative or loquacious kid. I was never afraid of speaking up. If I make a little mistake, so what? I'm not going to lose my life. All I lose is a bit of pride, as somebody told me. And I saw many movies. In retrospect, as a very small boy, before going to school, my father used to take me to movie theaters all the time. So, right after the war, when the war ended, Japan had a lot of stock or inventory of pre-war imported films.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Had not been released. French movies, an awful lot. I learned my first French in movies. How to tutoyer when a man and a woman change from je vous aime to je t'aime. Movies. But I saw many English language movies. One of the very first was Casablanca.
Oh, that's
in
a
which I
lovely
learned
movie.
the word like visa.
Yeah, well, I'm studying Japanese, or I work as a translator, and one of the most useful tools has definitely been the TV and movies.
Indeed. What are some of your favorite Japanese movies?
Oh, I love all the Kurosawa movies. Kurosawa, excuse me, yes.
What about the Tora-san?
I don't watch many of those, unfortunately, but since his death, I've become Tora-san, who just passed away last year.
Yes.
I've become more interested in Tora-san.
Tora-san is remembered by many famous phrases like それを言っちゃおしめよ. Do you understand that? それを言ってはおしまいです. That's what it means. Now, if you would translate this word for word, very literally, if you say that, that would be end of whatever, end of it. In other words, better not say it. My favorite translation is some of the things in life are best left unsaid.
That's true. Very true. Well, now, Mr. Muramatsu, you've worked as an interpreter to many, many top officials in the Japanese business world and also in government circles, including many prime ministers. Your participation in the first 9 summits of the G7 nation, I think, attest quite clearly to your skills. I'm sure you've been present at many history-making moments. Could you tell us about one or two of them?
Well, like the Apollo landing on the surface of the moon, 1969, when Neil Armstrong said, that's one small step for man a sexist language. One giant leap for mankind. There are several of us colleagues working for several stations, including, of course, NHK. I was one of the very first human voices that transmitted that message from out of this world to the Japanese living rooms. That was the event that made so-called simultaneous interpreting famous. And a lot of people who admired how quickly, how promptly that was being done, wanted to become interpreters, and they did.
Oh, really?
Yes.
But it must have been a very tense moment for you, I mean, because the sound transmission couldn't have been very good.
Very often it was all garbled. And in between the noises we heard numbers and acronyms, and pictures weren't even coming. And the interviewers, scientists, astronomers turned to us interpreters. Mr. Muramatsu, what do you get? Do you hear something? And the camera is aimed at me, and I look embarrassed and say, I hear some numbers, but I don't know what they mean.
That's one of the drawbacks, or it was one of the more stress-producing moments of interpretation, I'm sure.
And it has a lot of its excitement and pleasure, sheer pleasure in watching people communicate with each other, talking something a little bit or far beyond my comprehension, but because of my service, they communicate with each other and they please each other.
Yeah, when you think about it, it's an American on the moon, and you're transmitting his thoughts, his first words to the entire Japanese nation.
Right. I'm helping write a chapter in history.
Yes, you definitely were. Well, I think it's just about time for our first music break, and today we'll be listening to Okinawan music, and our first selection is Kinasho Kichi and Champalus, and the selection is Chin Chin. That was Jin Jin, and it was by Kinasho Kichi and Champalus. And I understand. Why did you ask us to play Okinawan music?
I'm very attached to Okinawa.
Really?
Somehow, I visited Okinawa 6, 7, 8 times, even going back to the days during the U.S. administration. There must be some kind of preordained destiny. In my school, I was born in 1930. So 36, 37, started going to primary school. My first teacher was from Okinawa. He had a strange family name. That kind of aroused my interest. And during the terrible war years, I was too young to go to war, too old, too grown up to be evacuated to the safe countryside. We middle school boys were working in the munitions factory, in fact building aircraft. And my colleagues, co-workers were young girls, high school girls, mobilized from Okinawa. And I'll never forget them because they went back during the height of the air raids. And so I don't know what happened to them. So shortly after the war, I made my visit to Okinawa. And I love the people, music, and I'm fascinated by its history.
Oh, I've been there once. And if you've just joined us, you're listening to Profile, and our guest today is Masumi Muramatsu, chairman of Simul International, a respected company in the field of translation, interpretation, and corporate communications, and a noted interpreter in his own right. Now, interpretation is, I think, one of the most demanding and stressful professions around. You can put in all the preparation in the world, and you still don't know what's going to be said. Now, I'm going to be a little bit unkind here, and I'd like to ask you if you would tell us, how should I put this rather delicately, about any minor mishaps or mistakes that have occurred.
Minor mistakes galore, and some medium-sized mistakes. No major blunders, no earth-shaking things. No war had ever started because of my mistranslation. But in my fledgling days, I didn't know the word agenda. You know, agenda you talk about for a conference.
Yes.
Every time I heard that word, I thought the American was talking about gender. And I kept wondering how come sex comes into this discussion. Fortunately, I avoided translating it into sex. But I have had my moments of deep satisfaction, having done a good job. Can I tell you one?
Yes,
my
I'd really like
favorite episode, when the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, visited Japan over 10 years ago now. He addressed the Japanese people through the Japanese Parliament called the Diet, joint sessions, and of course television and radio carried his voice and my interpretation, which was not simultaneous, consecutive. At one moment when the prince was talking about growing cultural exchange between his country and Japan, he said the British people were delighted that Prince Naruhito, then the later Crown Prince, chose Oxford to further his education. However, and his voice changed its tone a little bit. Had my view been asked for, I probably would have recommended Cambridge. Of course, a bit of chauvinism, a bit of course, but that's nice, regal humor, I thought. And when I translated that into Japanese, I put on a proper degree of, humor to make the audience laugh or be amused to the degree the prince expects. But I added the word. I would have probably recommended Cambridge, my alma mater, Japanese word boko, to make sure that every Japanese person listening or watching that television program would understand the prince was really joking about two rival schools, right? And that was one of my better moments.
Do you have any others that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, I'm more comfortable sharing your anecdotes of my minor failures. Like the prime minister of a certain friendly country, an English-speaking country, was visiting Japan about a year and a half ago. And he was being entertained for an elaborate luncheon by Japanese business leaders. And the place was high on one of the high-rise buildings in Tokyo, overlooking the beautiful imperial palace, a lot of greenery, beyond which there stood the Japanese parliament or diet building. As the first dish was being served, he said, "I feel your Japanese diet is more sophisticated than ours." I thought he was talking about the two legislatures. And having known a little bit about that country, where the members of the parliament often exchange in very verbal fight, if not fist fight, not like sometimes in Japan. And I translated it like that, but response didn't make sense to the prime minister, and I immediately realized he was complimenting Japanese food, Japanese diet, not as rich in calories or fat and beautifully presented Japanese, although but two meanings of the word double. Word diet. So that's one of my mistakes.
It's a very easy mistake to make. I think mistakes are inevitable.
But then those people laughed with this icebreaker at my small expense. I had a little red face.
I think you have to be humble to be an interpreter. But I'd like to now take another music break, and again we'll be listening to a song from Okinawa, and this time it'll be a traditional minyo song, and the name of the tune is Asadoya Yunta.
さどやの小山によさよいよいアンジュラさまりばしよまたはりのつんだらかのしゃまよさいみしゃからあぱりまりばしさよいよいこよさからしろさすりばしまたはりのすんだらかのしゃまよさみざししょのこよたらよさよいよいあたよやののずみょたよまたはりのつんだらかのしゃまよさみざししょ
That was Asadoya Yunta. I'm Melinda Hull, and today I'm talking on Profile with Masumi Muramatsu, one of Japan's top interpreters between English and Japanese. Now, I'd like to ask you, if you don't mind, there's, I think, some things that you face as an interpreter that are particularly difficult to interpret or translate. And I'm thinking here particularly of humor. How do you handle such situations?
One, Melinda, the interpreter himself or herself had better have some sense of humor. In my case, I have had good fortune of cultivating my own sense of humor because I've interpreted many jokes and made the people laugh. In my earlier days, I admit, once or twice, at least twice, I had to say, I am sorry, this is meant to be a joke, please laugh, and people laugh. But of late, I've been very successful in conveying humor, jokes particularly. I can not always, but very often anticipate the punchline. Can I tell you about one recent example?
Yes.
There was an international symposium about machine translation. Engineers, scientists, and technical people, language experts getting together from many countries discussing how to develop software, hardware, system for translating many languages in the world into one universal networking language from which to further translate back into various other languages. And a Russian delegate, a scientist, told a wonderful old-fashioned Russian anecdote, but a new subject. After liberation of many of the communist republics into independence, a group of Western or European journalists came to see what's happening there. And they came in a little microbus deep into the valley, high up on the plateau, found a lot of sheep and an old shepherd and a boy. So they scrambled out of the bus, asked them questions. Do you speak English? They don't understand. Parlez-vous français, if you can understand my French. They didn't understand it. Sprechen Sie Deutsch, habla usted español. Nothing worked. So the journalists all gave up, mounted the bus, and left. And the young shepherd boy said to his grandpa, Grandpa, I've told you, this is why we should all study foreign languages. Grandfather said, young boy or grandson, what's the use of foreign language? They all speak foreign languages, but they couldn't do anything here. And by the time the speaker said, the Russian began saying, the grandfather said, young boy, I almost anticipate a punchline. I didn't deliver it before he did, but almost simultaneously.
That's quite an accomplishment.
Well, I enjoy doing that. And because I collect these episodes and anecdotes, this was a public event. So I'm free to reveal whatever was interpreted as I interpreted. The information is in public domain. But many of the conferences I handled are confidential.
Yes.
Or dealing with proprietary business information. I will not repeat them. I will not even remember them. I remember some of them, but people think I remember more than I really do. So I tell them, as a professional interpreter, one of the very pioneers in Japan, I'm going to take this secret to my grave. The fact of the matter is I have forgotten most of them before I reach there, because I don't plan to be there in the near future.
Well, are there any other areas that you find particularly difficult to interpret, or are there certain things that you won't do because you don't think...
So many things that today I won't do, in all fairness to our clients. Technical conference, highly technical, medical, scientific, mechanical, which involves memorizing many technical terms. I leave them to young interpreters who have finished training. Many of the good interpreters, best interpreters, are trained by ourselves. If I mention a name, we run a school called Simon Academy. And for the first time, if they can concentrate themselves for a few days, memorize a set of technical terms, glossary, they can handle certain conferences beautifully, where jokes will not be told. There's no subtlety between the lines, like when politicians talk. By their nature, they have to be subtle or incommunicative very often.
Yes.
But if they begin talking about the future of the humanity and about the influence of religion and culture on the values or on the economy, industry, and so on, the older, more mature interpreters do better. So there's a sort of a comparative advantage, the working.
So you have a division of labor between...
Yes. And I'm happy to let these young people do that. They enjoy it, and they have far bigger marginal gain with every incremental assignment than I can do. I'll handle what I can do and collect a joke or anecdote for my next book.
Yes. Well, I think it's about time to take our final musical break, and this time we'll be listening again to a song from Okinawa called Hana, or Flower, and it's sung by Shizuru Otaka. That was Hana, or Flower, by Shizuru Otaka. You're listening to Profile, and our guest this week is Masumi Muramatsu, a gentleman who has had a long and distinguished career as the founder and head of one of Japan's most well-known translation and interpretation companies, and has also had a long career as an interpreter himself. Now, up until now, we've been talking about your many adventures as an interpreter.
Yes.
And I'd like to shift the focus just a little bit, if I may, and talk about some of your other activities.
Yes, more and more
Yes.
recently.
Well, I understand that you've been making considerable efforts to promote cross-cultural communication and build bridges between Japan and other countries.
And non-English speaking countries too, of course. Right?
Well, could you tell us about some of these activities?
Yes. Well, I'm one of the oldest members of the Japan-Turkish Society.
Oh, really?
Somehow, well, not somehow, but back in 70, I made my first visit to Turkey as an English interpreter for Japanese business mission. And I fell head over heels in love with Turkish people, Turkish food and everything. And I made 6 trips so far, and I've been instrumental in getting this scholar's book. Mete Tonjuk is a Turkish scholar who wrote this. This is his doctoral dissertation.
It's in
Modernization in Turkey and Japan, the role of foreign advisors. Mete Tonjuk, professor, wrote this in Japanese.
He wrote it in
He wrote it in
Japanese.
Japanese. And I met him, and I've been of some instrumental value in getting this published. I like Turkey, and I'm also one of the oldest individual members, and in fact today a director of the Japan, Australia, New Zealand Society. They are hyphenated for some historical reason, and when I say Australia and New Zealand, they are English-speaking countries,
Yes.
contrary to the conviction of some other people. And by the way, when I mentioned certain prime minister of certain friendly country who complimented the Japanese diet, was from Australia.
Oh, really?
Oh, they're wonderful people.
Yes.
And in fact, last time I interpreted in Canberra, the Australian Foreign Minister, the then Foreign Minister, Senator Gareth Evans, told a joke to the press corps in English. I translated that into Japanese, and he added a semi-personal comment to me. Mr. Muramatsu, you can write it in your next book.
Are there any other groups that you're involved with?
America-Japan Society. I'm relatively new. I had always figured there are plenty of active people in it, but recently I joined up because chairman of the society, former ambassador to U.S., Ambassador Okawara, is a very, very respected friend of mine. And I gave there a lecture, as I was invited to, in English about humor in American and Japanese leaders compared. And I'm really becoming more and more interested in the role of humor in cross-cultural communication. A lot of people ask, oh, is there such thing as Japanese humor? Some people say it's an oxymoron or terms in contradiction. I like to prove otherwise. People, tell funny things about when a Frenchman hears only half the joke, he would laugh. The Englishman would wait until the end of the joke, or would have to wait. Or the German would philosophize all night and laugh next morning. The Americans say that's an old joke, and besides you don't tell it right. And the people say the Japanese full of smile without understanding it. But if anybody says that, I will reply, well, we value harmony, so when everybody else is smiling, we smile. We later have a conference to decide whether to laugh or not.
To build a consensus.
That's right, consensus.
Well, I think the Japanese are very funny people. I've always
Once the
found
ice is broken,
Yes.
But the Japanese haven't made efforts to export our humor.
it's very some of the better movies that I see today
Today, yes.
are
Very humorous.
But when I watch them in Japanese, they're really funny, but I think there's no way you could translate this and make it sell overseas. That's unfortunate.
That's true. A lot of it lost in translation, as people say. But in the future, there should be more and more Japanese comedies. And I like to be a Japanese comedian, a clown. I like to, as I have more and more time at my disposal, I like to travel all over the world being an entertainer, Japanese entertainer, a sort of intellectual clown.
A good humor ambassador.
I hope so.
Yes, so I think you'd make a very good one. I also understand, in a slightly different vein, that you've written a number of books yourself.
Yes.
Could you tell us about some of them?
The first one was 19 years ago, called I Couldn't Speak English Either. Either or either, up to you. 私も英語が話せなかった。That was how, during the war, I first had conversation with prisoners of war.
Oh, really?
Yes, and wish I can tell you more about it. That was a very heartwarming experience for them too, I trust. And then worked for the U.S. military, went to Washington, D.C., became simultaneous interpreter for the U.S. government. I was trained by U.S. taxpayers' money. So sort of an autobiographical book. And then next year I wrote a sequel, and then I wrote a book called だから英語は面白い or Joy of English, named after joy of whatever. And I'm thinking about the joy of cooking and joy of Lex. There's L-E-X, a funny book about languages. And last year I published my fourth book called 指導者たちのユーモア or Humor in Leadership, Experiences of a Simultaneous Interpreter. That is the book I really enjoy writing.
Well, Mr. Muramatsu, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today, and I wish we had more time because you're a very interesting and entertaining
Thank you.
gentleman. I'd like to thank you for coming to our studios today and brightening them up for the last half hour.
Thank you, Melinda.
Thank you. Today, our guest on Profile was Masumi Muramatsu. I'm Melinda Hull, and this is Radio Japan, NHK World Network, Tokyo.